First contact gone wrong. The crystalline spires of the Meridian command ship glittered against the backdrop of Earth's atmosphere. High Commander Zixtal studied the holographic display of the blue planet with his faceted eyes, his crystalline form refracting the ambient light into patterns of contempt. Another organic civilization, he transmitted to his council through light pulse communication. Preliminary scans show primitive fusion technology, limited space presence, and no quantum manipulation capabilities. His crystal lattice structure vibrated with amusement. They haven't even solved their atmospheric carbon problem. The council's responses flickered through the chamber in waves of light. Their race had evolved beyond the need for sound waves millennia ago, communicating through pure light and crystal resonance. Their bodies, composed of living crystal, had achieved what they considered perfection. Eternal, unchanging, and precise. The planet's mineral wealth is considerable, observed Science Director Lyris, her form shifting through spectrum of deep blues. The organic civilization will be simple to displace. They lack even basic crystalline technology. How wrong they were. The Meridians had encountered dozens of species across the galaxy. Some fought with antimatter weapons, others with gravitational manipulation. All had fallen to the superior crystalline technology of the Meridian Empire. Their ships, grown from living crystal, were virtually indestructible to conventional weapons. Their computational systems, based on light passing through perfectly arranged crystal matrices, could process information at speeds that made organic brains seem frozen in time. The invasion began exactly as planned. Massive crystal ships descended through Earth's atmosphere, their surfaces refracting sunlight into dazzling displays of power. In New York, Tokyo, London, and other major cities, humans gathered to watch the spectacle. The Meridians expected awe, fear, and submission. Instead, they got questions, thousands of them. Through every radio frequency, television signal, and digital network, humans bombarded the crystal ships with attempts at communication. Not just from governments and military installations, but from civilians, scientists, children, anyone with a means to transmit. This is unprecedented, Zixtal transmitted to his council. No species has ever responded with such chaos. The random, uncoordinated attempts at contact confused their crystalline sensors. Where was the central authority? Where was the unified response? But this was only the beginning of their miscalculation. As the Meridians prepared their standard subjugation protocols, they noticed something strange. Humans were watching them, not just with their eyes, but with every instrument they possessed. Amateur astronomers tracked their movements. University labs analyzed their light patterns. Smartphone cameras recorded their every shift and shimmer. The humans were learning. Fast. When the first Meridian harvester began its descent over the Australian outback, intending to begin mining operations, it encountered something unexpected. A group of local engineers had noticed how the crystal ships reflected and refracted light. Within hours of first contact, they had rigged together an array of industrial lasers, originally used for mining operations, and calibrated them to match the precise frequency of Meridian crystal communication. The harvester ship's crystal matrix shuddered as it was bombarded not with weapons, but with what amounted to nonsense in Meridian light speech. The equivalent of a sensory overload headache rippled through its crystalline structure. Before Zixtal could process what was happening, the humans had discovered their first weakness. Impossible, Zixtal transmitted, his crystal form clouding with concern. They couldn't have decoded our communication protocol so quickly. They don't even have quantum computers. But they didn't need to decode anything. Humans had done what they did best. They observed, they experimented, and they improvised. They didn't need to understand the complex mathematics behind crystalline communication. They just needed to see what made the ships react. As the first day of the invasion drew to a close, Zixtal faced an uncomfortable realization. The Meridians had evolved to perfect their crystalline nature, becoming beings of pure logic and order. But in doing so, they had lost something the humans possessed in abundance: the ability to think outside established patterns. The real test of their assumptions about humanity's capabilities was about to begin, and for the first time in centuries, a flutter of uncertainty passed through Zixtal's crystalline core. The unexpected defense. The second day of the invasion revealed just how drastically the Meridians had underestimated human adaptability. While Zixtal's forces had expected a conventional military response, missiles, aircraft, perhaps even nuclear weapons, they instead faced something far more confounding: human creativity unleashed. In Mumbai, a teenage robotics enthusiast discovered that the crystalline ships responded to certain frequencies of sound. Her competition-winning ultrasonic array, originally designed for waste management, now served as a disruption device, creating interference patterns that made the crystal ship's communication systems stutter and glitch. "They're using acoustic weapons now." Science Director Lyris's form flickered with disbelief. "But their technology is centuries behind ours." "That's not technology," responded combat analyst Vexnor, his crystalline edges dulling with concern. "That's a cleaning device repurposed. They're improvising." Across the globe, humans demonstrated an uncanny ability to repurpose everyday technology in ways the Meridians had never considered. In Brazil, a team of carnival lighting designers discovered they could confuse Meridian sensors with precisely timed strobes and mirrors. In South Africa, mining engineers used industrial diamonds to redirect the aliens' own light-based weapons back at them. But it was the internet that proved to be humanity's most powerful weapon. Within hours of the first attack, humans worldwide were sharing observations, theories, and countermeasures. The Meridians watched in growing alarm as their weaknesses were documented, analyzed, and exploited through what they had dismissed as a primitive information exchange system. "Their response makes no sense," Zixtal transmitted to his council. "There's no central coordination, no unified strategy, yet somehow they're more effective than any species we've encountered." A junior analyst's light pulses carried a note of revelation. "Perhaps that's precisely why they're effective, Commander. We can't predict or counter their strategy because there isn't one. Each group of humans is solving the problem differently." The truth of this observation became painfully clear when the Meridians attempted to establish their first ground base in the Siberian tundra. They had chosen the location for its isolation, assuming the sparse human population would make it an easy target. Instead, they found themselves facing local engineers who had spent their careers maintaining equipment in extreme conditions. These engineers didn't see an advanced alien force. They saw systems that could fail. And in their experience, everything had a breaking point. They proved this by using modified oil drilling equipment to create vibrations at the crystalline structure's resonant frequency, causing hairline fractures that spread through the perfect lattices of Meridian technology. "How are they doing this?" Lyris demanded, her crystal form clouded with frustration. "Their scientific understanding is fundamentally flawed. They still debate basic quantum principles. They don't need to understand it," Vexnor realized, his structure dimming. "They just need to see what works and share that information. Their strength isn't in their knowledge. It's in their willingness to experiment, to fail, and to learn from those failures." The Meridians had built their civilization on perfection, on the idea that every problem had an optimal solution that, once found, need never be revised. Humans, in contrast, seemed to delight in finding dozens of solutions to the same problem, ranging from the elegant to the ridiculously impractical. And somehow, the impractical solutions often proved the most effective against the Meridians' perfect defenses. As the second day drew to a close, Zixtal received reports that humans had begun modifying weather radar systems to track Meridian ship movements, using playground equipment as makeshift signal amplifiers, and in one particularly baffling case, employing a repurposed popcorn machine to generate electromagnetic interference. "This cannot continue," he transmitted to his council, his crystal structure vibrating with determination. "We must end this quickly, before they become even more creative." But as he issued orders for a full-scale assault, a disturbing thought crystallized in his consciousness. What if the humans' apparent primitive state wasn't a sign of inferiority, but rather an indication that they were still actively evolving, still learning, still adapting? And what if the Meridians' perfect, unchanging nature was about to become their greatest weakness? The breaking point. Dr. Sarah Chen stared at her lab results in disbelief. What had started as a routine spectral analysis of meridian crystal fragments had turned into something far more significant. Her team at the Singapore Quantum Research Center had been studying debris from a damaged alien ship when they noticed something extraordinary. The crystalline structures didn't just communicate through light, they were fundamentally altered by it. Meanwhile, across the globe, the Meridian assault had intensified. Crystal ships now hung over every major city, their surfaces shimmering with barely contained energy. Zixtal had ordered an overwhelming show of force, believing that humans would finally submit when faced with the full might of Meridian technology. Their resistance ends today, he transmitted to his fleet. Begin the synchronized attack. But in that moment of apparent triumph, the Meridians had made their most critical mistake. In gathering their ships in such concentrated numbers, they had given Dr. Chen exactly what she needed: a test audience. The crystals aren't just transmitting light, she explained to the hastily assembled Global Defense Council, her words translated and broadcast to scientists worldwide. They're living matrices that exist in a state of quantum coherence, and like any quantum state, they can be collapsed, finished Dr. Patel, her colleague in quantum computing. But how do we generate enough power to affect their entire fleet? The answer came from an unexpected source, a graduate student who had been stress-eating while watching old sci-fi movies, made the connection. What if we don't need to generate the power ourselves? What if we could use what's already there? The plan that emerged was audacious in its simplicity. The Meridians had positioned their ships in Earth's atmosphere, essentially surrounding themselves with a giant lens. If humans could find the right frequency, the exact resonance that would disrupt the Meridian's crystalline structure, Earth's atmosphere itself could be turned into an amplifier. Zixtal noticed the change first. His perfect crystalline form began to feel strange. Frequencies he had never encountered before were penetrating his structure, creating interference patterns in his thought processes. Around him, other Meridians were experiencing similar effects. What are they doing? Lyris demanded, her usually precise light pulses becoming erratic. This shouldn't be possible with their level of technology. But again, the humans had bypassed the need for advanced technology. Using a worldwide network of modified radio telescopes, weather stations, and even repurposed satellite dishes, they had created a makeshift resonance web. Each device alone was primitive, but together they formed something the Meridians had never imagined: a planet-wide quantum disruption field. The effect was devastating. The perfectly ordered crystal matrices that made up Meridian bodies and technology began to experience quantum decoherence. Their ships, their weapons, even their very forms started to lose the perfect structure that had been their greatest pride. "Stop this," Zixtal commanded, broadcasting on all frequencies. "You don't understand what you're doing." But the humans understood exactly what they were doing. Dr. Chen and her global team had discovered that the Meridians' greatest strength, their crystalline nature, was also their greatest vulnerability. By forcing their quantum states to interact with carefully calculated frequencies, they could induce a cascading failure in the very foundation of Meridian existence. As his ship's crystal matrix began to show signs of strain, Zixtal faced a horrifying realization. The humans weren't just fighting back. They had fundamentally understood something about his species that the Meridians themselves had forgotten. In pursuing perfect crystalline order, they had become fragile. Their inability to adapt, to change, to exist in multiple states simultaneously, traits they had seen as primitive in humans, had become their undoing. "We must retreat," he transmitted, his signal weakening as the quantum disruption intensified. "But remember this moment. We didn't just underestimate their technology. We underestimated their ability to turn understanding into action. As the Meridian fleet began its desperate withdrawal from Earth's atmosphere, Dr. Chen watched from her laboratory. "You know what's remarkable," she said to her team. "They probably could have adapted to counter this attack, but they're so committed to their idea of perfection, they never even considered changing their fundamental nature." The humans had discovered something profound. True strength didn't lie in achieving perfection, but in maintaining the ability to change, to adapt, and sometimes to be imperfect. As the Meridian ships retreated into space, their once perfect crystalline forms now latticed with fractures. Humanity had proven that flexibility could overcome even the most advanced technology. The tables turn. The retreat of the Meridian fleet marked not the end of the conflict, but its transformation. Humanity, having discovered the fundamental vulnerability of their crystalline adversaries, was not content to simply defend. They had learned too much, adapted too well, and most importantly, they had lost their fear of the seemingly invincible invaders. Admiral Helena Rodriguez, newly appointed commander of Earth's Unified Defense Force, stood before a holographic display of known Meridian positions in the solar system. "They're regrouping at the edge of the asteroid belt," she announced to the Global Defense Council. "But they're not leaving. They're adapting." She was right. The Meridians, for the first time in their millennia-long history, were being forced to change. Zixtal had ordered his engineers to modify their ship's crystalline structures, attempting to compensate for the quantum disruption tactics that humans had developed. But change didn't come easily to a species that had built its entire civilization on the principle of perfect, unchanging order. "We can't alter our fundamental nature," Lyris argued during a crisis council meeting. "It goes against everything we are. Then we face extinction." Vexnor responded, his crystalline form showing subtle variations that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. "The humans have proven that static perfection is a weakness in an evolving universe." But while the Meridians struggled with their internal crisis, humanity pressed its advantage in unexpected ways. Dr. Chen's team had made another breakthrough. If specific frequencies could disrupt Meridian crystal structures, other frequencies could influence them in subtler ways. "Think of it like music," Dr. Chen explained to Admiral Rodriguez. "We've been using the equivalent of a sonic boom. But what if we could play them a symphony instead?" The implications were staggering. Humans began developing what they called quantum harmonics, precise frequency combinations that could interact with Meridian crystalline consciousness in increasingly sophisticated ways. It wasn't just about disruption anymore. It was about communication, influence, and eventually, manipulation. The first test of this new approach came when a Meridian scout ship approached Mars. Instead of attacking it, Earth's defense forces surrounded it with a complex network of quantum frequency emitters. The frequencies they broadcast weren't destructive. Instead, they created patterns of interference that the Meridians found impossible to ignore. "It's like they're speaking directly to our crystal matrix," reported the scout ship's commander. "But not in any language we know. It's making us think in new ways." The humans had discovered that they could induce specific thought patterns in Meridian consciousness by exploiting the quantum nature of their crystalline minds. They weren't just fighting anymore. They were engaging in warfare on a quantum consciousness level. This development terrified the Meridian High Command. Their perfect, orderly minds were being exposed to chaos, uncertainty, and worst of all, new ideas. Some younger Meridians began exhibiting unprecedented behaviors, questioning orders, suggesting alternative strategies, even expressing curiosity about human culture. "They're infecting us with their disorder," Zixtal warned his increasingly fractured council. "Every encounter with their quantum harmonics leaves our people changed." But not all Meridians saw this as a threat. A growing faction, led by Vexner, began to see the changes as evolution rather than corruption. "Our pursuit of perfection led us to stagnation," he argued. "The humans aren't destroying us. They're forcing us to grow." The conflict had evolved beyond traditional warfare. Humans were now broadcasting complex quantum frequency patterns throughout the solar system, creating what they called a consciousness evolution field. Any Meridian ship that entered this field was exposed to new ways of thinking, new possibilities, new potential for change. Admiral Rodriguez watched as more and more Meridian ships showed signs of deviation from their standard patterns. "We're not just winning a war," she observed. "We're helping an entire species break free from its self-imposed limitations." The greatest victory, however, came not from any battle or technological breakthrough, but from a simple transmission received from a group of young Meridians who had been exposed to human quantum harmonics. "We wish to learn a new understanding." 1 year after the failed invasion, the crystalline spires of the Meridian command ship once again gleamed in Earth's orbit, but this time it was different. The ship's crystal structure showed subtle imperfections, deliberate variations that would have been unthinkable in the past. These imperfections weren't weaknesses, they were evidence of evolution. High Commander Zixtal, his own form now bearing traces of asymmetry, stood before a joint council of human and Meridian leaders. The meeting was being held in a specially designed chamber aboard the International Space Station, where quantum harmonic generators maintained a field of mutual understanding between the two species. "We came to your world believing we had achieved perfection," Zixtal transmitted, his light pulses automatically translated by human quantum interfaces. "We thought our crystalline nature, our unchanging form, our perfect order represented the pinnacle of evolution. We were wrong." Dr. Chen, now heading the newly established Institute for Xenoquantum Relations, nodded in agreement. "And we humans thought our greatest weakness was our imperfection, our constant state of change and adaptation. We were wrong too." The truth they had discovered together was both simple and profound. The Meridians' pursuit of perfection had led them to an evolutionary dead end, while humanity's embracing of imperfection had kept them in a constant state of growth. But it was the combination of both approaches that offered the greatest potential. "Look at what we've achieved in just 1 year." Admiral Rodriguez gestured to the holographic displays showing joint human-Meridian projects across the solar system. Crystal organic hybrid technologies were revolutionizing everything from space travel to computing. Meridian quantum consciousness was being enhanced by human creativity and adaptability, while human technology was being transformed by Meridian precision and efficiency. But the most remarkable changes were cultural. Young Meridians were learning to embrace variation and change, incorporating random elements into their crystal structures to enhance their ability to adapt. Humans, in turn, were learning to appreciate the beauty of order and precision, finding new ways to balance chaos and structure. "We're seeing the emergence of a new form of consciousness," Vexnor, now leading the Meridian Science Council, explained. His crystalline form shimmered with complex patterns that would have been considered heretical a year ago. Neither purely crystalline nor purely organic, but something that transcends both. The quantum harmonics program had evolved far beyond its military origins. Human musicians were composing crystal symphonies that could induce new states of consciousness in Meridian minds. Meridian artists were creating living crystal sculptures that responded to human emotions. The boundaries between the two species were beginning to blur in ways no one had anticipated. "But what about the other crystalline empires?" asked a concerned council member. "Not all Meridians have embraced this change. Some still cling to the old ways." Zixtal's form rippled with what humans had learned to recognize as amusement. "Let them come and see for themselves. Let them witness what happens when perfection learns to dance with chaos." As if to emphasize his point, a group of human children were visiting the station that day, part of a cultural exchange program. They pressed their hands against the quantum-shielded windows, their eyes wide with wonder as young Meridians demonstrated how they could now modify their crystal structures to create rainbow patterns in response to human laughter. "This is what we never understood about humans," Lyris, who had become one of the strongest advocates for change, transmitted. "Their strength wasn't in their technology or their weapons. It was in their ability to imagine something better than perfection." and then make it real. Dr. Chen watched as human and Meridian children played together, their differences becoming the very source of their connection. Maybe that's the real lesson here, she mused. True advancement doesn't come from achieving perfection or embracing chaos. It comes from learning to see beauty in both. As the joint council session concluded, a new transmission was broadcast throughout human and Meridian space. It wasn't a declaration of peace or a diplomatic agreement. It was something far more significant, an invitation to all species in the galaxy to join in what they called the Great Evolution, a commitment to grow not by conquering or perfecting, but by learning to change together. The message was transmitted in both human languages and Meridian light pulses, carrying within it the very quantum harmonics that had first bridged the gap between their consciousness. It was proof that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't perfection or chaos, but the willingness to learn from those who are different from ourselves. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, other civilizations received this message and began to wonder about these strange partners, the crystalline beings who had learned to embrace change, and the chaotic creatures who had taught them how to grow.